I'm the best ever. I'm the most brutal and vicious and most ruthless champion there's ever been. There's no one can stop me.
Welcome back, fight fans, to another installment of Corner to Corner Boxing. This is Louie. Man, I've been looking forward to this episode for months now. The much anticipated Spence versus Crawford fight is this Saturday, and we're going to break it down today. So, a quick background check on Spence versus Crawford. As I'm sure everybody that's listening knows, this is for the undisputed welterweight title of the world. We have two top pound for pound guys, both undefeated, both in their prime, in top form. They're going to meet up to give us one of the best welterweight showdowns in decades. And I look at this fight and it gives me Leonard versus Hearn vibes. This is the biggest fight in a very long time, especially in the welterweight division. We have two guys whose styles are going to match up so well that it's hard not to see this turning into a firefight. Both guys are absolute dogs. Neither guy knows what losing is like. So they're both coming to take it. And I just couldn't be more excited, as you can tell. This fight, like I said, will be this Saturday, July 29th, Las Vegas, Nevada, on Showtime pay-per-view. Let's jump right into the tail of the tape. We'll start off with Errol Spence Jr. Errol Spence is 33 years old, fighting out of Dallas, Texas. He's listed at 5 feet, 9.5 inches with a 72-inch reach. Any pound for pound list worth their salt has him somewhere in there. Generally he's in the top 5. I've seen him, in the top 3. I've seen him below the top 5, but he's definitely a pound for pound talent, no doubt about it. He's undefeated with 28 wins, 22 of those coming by KO. He is currently the unified welterweight champion. He holds the WBA, the WBC, and the IBF titles. He has a distinction of being the second longest reigning welterweight champion of all time, only behind Tito Trinidad. It took him about 5 years to unify the division. He's had a history of injuries. He had a really bad car accident a couple of years ago. More recently, he had an eye injury that forced him to pull out of the fight against Pacquiao. Nevertheless, going back to 2017, he stopped Kell Brook in brutal fashion, broke his orbital bone to win the IBF title. He went to the UK, to Brook's home backyard, and beat him into attrition. In 2019, at a fight I attended live, he challenged Porter for his WBC title. He won a split decision in that fight. That was one of the best fights of the year, action-packed. As we all know, Porter is one of those guys that it's very hard to look good against, and he's a dog, right? Like, he's always there to fight. And more recently, in 2022, he challenged Ugas for Ugas's WBA title, and he brutalized Ugas. Ugas put forth a great effort, but like many of Spence's fights, it was a battle of attrition. He broke him. Moving on, Terence Crawford, 35 years old, out of Omaha, Nebraska, listed at 5 feet 8 inches with a 74-inch reach. Again, another pound for pound guy. I've seen him listed as high as 1, but he's generally within the 1 to 5 range. He's 39-0, 30 of those coming by knockout. He's on a great streak right now. 10 of his last 10 fights have all ended in a stoppage, including all of his fights at 147 have ended in a KO. He became the welterweight champion, the WBO champion back in 2018. He stopped Jeff Horn in, for the lack of a better word, a one-sided ass whooping. He was the first undisputed champion in a very long time at 140, or the first undisputed champion in general. He broke an 18-year dry spell. The last undisputed champion we had was Jermaine Taylor back in 2005. So he had a great one at 140, and moved up to 147, and has been just tearing through the competition that's been put in front of him. So, like all our fight breakdowns, we're going to talk about what each fighter does well. We're going to talk about their quote unquote weaknesses, or as I like to call them, areas of opportunity. And then we're going to take all that into consideration, give my opinion on what their path to victory should look like, and like always, offer up my humble prediction on who I think will come out victorious. So what they do well, we'll kick it off with Spence. I've heard him called a lot of nicknames, right? The Big Fish, the Truth. My favorite nickname for Errol Spence is the Big Fundamental. This guy is textbook. Everything from the feet up is just like they teach you in a boxing gym. If you were to open up a boxing textbook, right, a how-to on boxing, you're going to see Errol Spence in there. Solid defense. He's not a flashy fighter, right, but he's deceivingly high level. He has great high-level tactics, great IQ, great distance management and timing, and it all centers around his jab. If you ask 10 people that know boxing, I would be surprised if one didn't tell you that the jab is the most important punch in the sport. And Errol Spence arguably, and in my opinion, does have the best jab in the sport. It's strong, it's consistent, and it's a volume-based jab. He pumps that thing out like a piston. For context, he throws about 36 jabs around. Compared to Crawford, and there's some rounds where Spence's jab output is higher than Crawford's total punch output in those rounds. That obviously you can't throw that many punches unless you have a great engine, which Errol Spence does. I can't think of a time that I've seen him fatigued. He is a workhorse, man. This guy has wonderful stamina, a high work rate. A couple of stats here. He averages 70 total punches per round. He averages 16 power punches landed around. Both of those stats put him at number one when compared to other fighters in the top 10 pound for pound list. So it's when I say that Errol Spence fights battles of attrition, he literally goes out there and throws a kitchen sink at you and just sees who can last longer, right? It is what it is, right? He goes out there and he just tries to outwork you and put a beating on you. Very high level inside game. It's one of the best. I think back and it's reminiscent of like Duran level inside game. Like he is so subtle that a lot of times when you watch, him using one hand to peel the guard and create openings, like he does so many subtle but genius things that it's hard to pick up on. You really have to slow the tape down and look for these things, or you'll miss it. But like I said earlier, he's not flashy, but he's deceivingly high level. On the inside, he goes to the body like no other. I think, along with, you know, the Canelos, the Inoues, and Spence, those are the top three body punchers. I think Spence has one of the best, arguably the best, body attack in boxing. And he loves to go to the liver. I mean, for context, right? We talked about he has one of the highest punch output per round among top 10 pound for pound fighters. 30% of his total punches are thrown to the body. So like a piggy bank, he invests in the body and he looks to collect interest on those body shots later on in the fight, and he usually does. Moving on to Crawford, the thing that stands out about Crawford is this guy is a fucking freak of nature. Uber athletic, deceivingly strong, right? Quick twitch style. Like, you know, he just fucking, like, no effort, just can throw something without even thinking and land something hard. He switch hits. He's a southpaw generally, but he can fight just as well from an orthodox position. And he can crack with both fucking hands. Just like Spence, he has a very high IQ in a much different way. Like we talked about Errol Spence, he's much more fundamentally sound. Crawford is a lot more creative and a lot more flashy in the ring. He's super adaptable in different situations. He can apply pressure. He can counterpunch. He fights on the back foot. He can use defense aggressively to create opportunities and land shots. And he's pretty good on the inside as well. The cornerstone of Crawford's style has to be his counterpunching. At least that's what's the most notable. And just like we talked about before about his adaptability, he can set up counterpunching in very unorthodox ways and in a lot of different ways. He has wonderful footwork. He takes a lot of risk at taking different angles. And again, he's super athletic. He can get away with a lot of that stuff. And he most of the time it pays off for him. He also has a great jab. He has wonderful feints. And like most counterpunchers and high-level tacticians in the ring, he is very good at downloading information. So he picks up on patterns and uses them to, you know, get his opponents off balance, land counters, and once he does that, he is one of the best finishers in the game. His finishing ability is second to none in my opinion. He reminds me of like a Mike Tyson, right? When he smells blood, he's gonna fucking go in there and finish you, right? Like, there's not a lot of fighters that get hurt by Crawford and live to see the end of the fight, right? Maybe not live, but make it to the end of the fight. You know, one of the better examples is Shawn Porter. I mean, Shawn Porter, although was, you know, it seemed like 1 foot out the door of the sport, it was his last fight. But one thing you can say about Shawn Porter is that guy was a dog. You know, he was never outclassed clearly in any of his losses other than Crawford, because Crawford stopped him. And that's because he smelled blood. There was a great moment in that fight. I think he stops him in the 9th or the 10th. But before that bell rang for that respective round, when when he ended the fight, his corner tells him, "Hey, Porter's up," and he looks at his corner. He's like, "He's up, okay," and it just looked like he hit another gear internally and hit a kill switch and just went out there and ended the fight. Said, "Fuck the judges. I don't want to put myself in a position where I can get robbed or anything like that." And obviously, it's boxing. It's boxing in Vegas, so he wasn't taking any chances. But there's not many fighters that have that kill switch embedded in them, and Crawford certainly does. Moving on to areas of opportunities for each fighter or weaknesses. And look, this is just a precursor here to this section. Both of these guys are very high level fighters, right? And please take these with a grain of salt, because I am basically nitpicking on a lot of these things, right? They're like any fighters, they both have, quote unquote weaknesses, but again, if you might not agree with some of these, and that's because I wanted to keep this fair and balanced, so I had to look for weaknesses in each fighter to make this a quality breakdown, I guess. So starting off with Spence, is his outside game isn't, I wouldn't call it weak, but it's pretty basic, right? Where he really shines is on the inside, but outside, he doesn't do anything too fancy or too special. It's, again, very fundamental. One thing that I noticed is he doesn't counter very well against southpaws, which Crawford is, and he's a very high-level southpaw, so I can see that being an issue if it's, a fight fought on the outside, a battle of counter-punching. It can create some openings for Crawford. Sticking with the outside part of Errol Spence's game, it looks like he tends to reach a lot, right? Especially when he feels like, he's landing something, and, not only does he reach, but he tends to get caught out on his front foot, which, against a high-level counterpuncher like Crawford, that if you get caught out on your front foot reaching, there's that old saying, "You reach, I teach," and Crawford does that very well. So, sticking with the fundamentals, not overexerting on punches and leaning out too far, I think is something that Spence could work on. Spence has great defense, but he does tend to shell up in his high guard a lot, and he'll shell up. He won't really move too much. He'll kind of stay planted. He doesn't use his feet, doesn't use head movement. We all know when you're stuck in your high guard, there's openings on the sides, there's opening to the body. So you really don't want to give a highly efficient sharpshooter like Crawford a stationary target. Moving on to Crawford, I think the biggest thing is, and this works in his advantage a lot of the times, but it can be a disadvantage, is he is such a competitor, and he's like a stubborn fucking guy. Like, he does not like to lose. So he gets careless at times, and it seems like he lets the competitor in him get the best of him, and he gets caught. Like, a lot of times he tries to force things that that he might see but aren't quite there yet, and he'll try to force a certain counter, or he'll try to anticipate a certain punch. He commits to it, and he ends up getting caught. And that commitment is what makes him such a strong and great fighter, right? Because he's 100 or nothing when he's throwing those punches, but when you're wrong, you leave yourself open. And against a fucking guy that can crack like Spence, that has that bone-breaking power, I don't know that you want to guess wrong too much. That being said, like any fighter that downloads data, that generally tends to correct itself over the course of the fight, the more data he has to sample. The other thing that I think might be a disadvantage is we talked earlier about Spence's high work rate. He keeps you fucking busy. Crawford is the opposite. He tends to start slow. And, generally in the second half of the fight, he picks it up. And like I said, he's very adaptable. But the majority of his fights have started very slow. And you don't necessarily, like, it's hard to start slow against a guy like Spence because he's going to work. And even if he's not hurting you, he can eat up rounds, right? And earn points. I don't know how this fight ends, but I think there's a pretty good probability that it goes to the cards. So when it's, such a close fight, I don't think you can afford to give up any rounds. So, his slow pace in the beginning might be an opportunity for Spence to pick up some early points. Moving on, paths to victory. We'll start with Spence. We talked about it. His jab is the cornerstone of not only his offense, but his defense. So he needs to get that sucker off effectively and just do what he always does, right? Just pump the fucking jab. Again, sticking with what he does well is he needs to keep the work pace up. And not only keep it up, but try to get a little bit more creative and give Bud different looks. And hopefully, Bud is going to try to download this information to set up counter shots and look for opportunities, right? If he keeps the pace up and gives him a lot of different looks, it's like information overload, right? He gives him so much info that he doesn't know what to do with it or manage it effectively. Obviously, we talked about Spence's inside game being much better and probably the best in the sport. So he needs to cut off the ring. Crawford, I think, has significantly better footwork, at least right on the outside from in the middle of the ring. I think Crawford will have the advantage. So Spence has to cut off the ring, not only cut off the ring, but get inside effectively, right? It's not enough to cut off the ring and get caught with something, right? Like he has to cut off the ring, avoid getting caught on the way in, and then, making it his fight on the inside. Although Crawford is a very good infighter, I think he's going to lose the infighting fight to Spence. Moving on, path to victory for Crawford. It's going to revolve around the jab. He has to do two things. He has to neutralize Spence's jab. And look, that's easier said than done. Porter did a wonderful job at neutralizing Spence's jab by smothering him, right? By getting inside and fighting on the inside. That's Porter's fight. Like Porter wanted to make it a dirty, ugly fight. I don't know that Crawford can do that, but he has to find a way to neutralize it, and he has to find a way to get his jab off, and not only just get it off, but get it off and land it, get it off effectively. He has to try to stay in the center of the ring, I think, get Spence to reach, right? We talked about the difference between Crawford's outside game and Spence's outside game. I think Crawford will have the advantage in the middle of the ring, at a longer distance. So getting Spence to reach and hopefully getting him stuck on his front foot, like I said, and countering him with something. And I think the most important path to victory for Crawford is don't let the emotions get to you. Both these guys are uber competitive. They're both undefeated. They don't like to lose, and we've seen it in the past with Crawford allowing himself to get caught up on these and these exchanges that he really shouldn't get caught up in. And for the most part, and I think this can be said for both fighters, although I do think that Spence has the better resume overall, but they are each other's best opponent by far. So Crawford has been able to get away with that throughout his career, fighting, and I don't say this disrespectfully, but lesser level opposition. I don't think you want to do that with a guy like Spence. So all that being said, let's jump into the prediction. And a quick disclosure up front. This is one of the harder predictions that I've had to make, mainly because over the last couple of months since this fight was announced, I have thought countless times about this fight. And each time that I think about it, I see it playing out a different way. So I can easily go either way on this fight. However, I'm going to pick Spence to win this fight by decision. And my logic is this. You have two guys in their prime, in top form. Both are incredibly talented and physically gifted. You have Terence Crawford, who is a much more unorthodox fighter that takes a lot of risk and gets really creative in the ring, but at times he forgets the fundamentals, right? And he takes these high level risks in the fight, and he pays the price for them. Granted, he's undefeated. He's won most of his fights by knockout. However, and this can be said for both guys, this is his toughest competition to date. On the other hand, you have Errol Spence, who's just as equally gifted as Terence Crawford and talented, but this guy's foundation is built around fundamentals, around the jab, around responsible defense, around tight, responsible, efficient punches. So I think when you look at two guys that are equally physically gifted and talented, you have to go with the guy that has the better fundamentals, which is what I'm doing here. Again, I could be wrong because this is as 50-50 as this gets, but I'm sticking to it. I'm going to go Spence by decision. That being said, I have no fucking idea what's going to happen. And this is what makes this fight so intriguing. I cannot wait. I mean, this is a fight that I've been salivating over for years, just like any boxing fan has, right? Like, we've been wanting to see this for the last 4 or 5 years. And boxing has a way of being cruel to its fans by, not delivering. And then bang, you wake up one day and there's a big ass fight announcement like this. So, I've compared boxing to a toxic ex-girlfriend that just keeps you coming back. This is what this is. This is one of the biggest fights in the last couple of decades, I think. And I think it's going to be an instant classic. So we'll just have to tune in. I can't wait to watch it. I can't wait to break it down after the fact. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Thank you very much, and I look forward to talking to you guys again on the fight hangover after the fight. This is Corner to Corner Boxing, where we cover all angles of the sweet science.